Something scary is plaguing the housing market right now. And no, it's not interest rates, it's not inflation. Some are saying it's the mortgage industry's remake of The Walking Dead called The Walking Debt. And rightfully so, because I'm talking about the zombie mortgage. These are mortgages that you thought were satisfied, that you thought were forgiven a while ago, but in reality they weren't. And they're coming back from the dead, and they're coming back to haunt you now. This is only applicable to some homeowners. Most of us out there should not be worried. Nonetheless, it's still good to know, so let's get into it. Now, let's rewind back to the years leading up to the 2008 recession. This was a period in which lenders issued a lot of subprime loans, loans with good terms issued to borrowers who do not qualify for those loans. So a common practice during this time was something called a second mortgage. This is basically a supplement to your first mortgage, the primary method of financing for your house. And a practice that lenders commonly did back then was something called 80-20 financing, where a lender would finance 80% of the property through their first mortgage, and the other 20% would be financed through a second mortgage, either by the same lender or by another lender. Now, this did two things. It allowed a borrower to basically get 100% financing for their property, and it also allowed them to avoid mortgage insurance, which is required when you put over 80% down. However, when the 2008 crash hit, home values plummeted and also homeowners' equity plummeted. This basically meant that these second mortgages lost most of, if not all of their value. And I'll give you an example to illustrate this. So let's say you have 80-20 financing on your house. The house is worth $500,000. So $400,000 is financed through a first mortgage and $100,000 is through your second mortgage. Now, here's what you got to remember. The second mortgage is subordinate to your first one, meaning that if you foreclose on the property, the first mortgage, the first lien on the property has to be paid off first before the second mortgage is paid off. So let's say it's 2008, this $500,000 house, what was $500,000 now is $350,000. And so they foreclose on the property, they sell it for $350,000 at a foreclosure auction, but they take that $350,000 and all of that first has to go towards the first mortgage. $350,000 doesn't even cover the first mortgage, it covers most of it, but not all of it. And so the second mortgage basically gets no money. Whatever lender holds that piece of debt, they get no money, basically. And so why would someone who issued a second mortgage foreclose on it when they're basically just doing the work for the holder of the first mortgage and not getting any money in return? So what you find is these second mortgage holders are doing a few things. Firstly, they're either going out of business completely, they're not sending you requests for payments anymore, you're not hearing any communication from them, or they're literally telling you, look, you're no longer obligated to pay this mortgage off. And so you find these things happening a lot during this period. However, there's a lot more happening behind the scenes. Borrowers are being convinced that they no longer are obligated to pay off these mortgages, but the lending industry requires liquidity. If you're a lender, you constantly need cash to supply more loans. Having cash on hand is necessary to survive in that business. And so loans, pieces of debt, are constantly sold. They're bought and they're resold. And so a piece of debt will switch hands multiple times throughout its life. So meanwhile, these second mortgages are being bought and sold, and people are buying them for pennies on the dollar, or even fractions of a penny on the dollar, because they're worth nothing. Because there's so little equity in the homes now, as property values have plummeted, these second mortgages are practically worthless at the given moment. And so they're selling at huge discounts. And so here's the critical thing. A lot of these second mortgages were never actually forgiven. They were sold to someone else, and now that other party holds this piece of debt now. The original lender, whoever originally lent out that second mortgage, they may be telling you that you don't owe the money anymore, but they don't own that note anymore. They no longer have to collect that debt. That other person, that other investor holds that piece of debt. And so it's a gray area because a lot of lenders are telling you things that in reality aren't true. And now we get to recent times when the median home price in the country has never been higher. Homeowners have more equity in their homes than ever. And so these people who bought these second mortgages back then, back in 2008 when these mortgages were worth nothing, now they can capitalize on that significantly because the home value has gone up so much, and now these second mortgages are actually worth quite a lot. Think about a home, I gave an example of a $500,000 home. It's worth $1 million now. Well, that second mortgage was originally for $100,000, but now the home's worth $1 million, so they can get a lot more than what it was back in 2008, when in my example, it was $350,000. And so what's really scary, what's happening now, is these people who bought second mortgages back in the '08 recession when they were worth practically nothing, they still owned that debt. And yes, they weren't asking for the borrowers to make payments over the last 16 years, but the borrowers are technically still liable. And now that this person owns this debt, they can pursue foreclosure or they can pursue repayment of that loan because they technically have the right to. And so there's a story that recently hit the headlines. A woman in Quincy, Massachusetts named Karen McDonough. She bought her home around 20 years ago. She was a single mother, a nurse, and needed help financing this home. So she got an 80-20 loan from her lender. So got a first mortgage for 80%, a second mortgage for 20%. And so in the '08 recession, she had to do something called modifying her mortgage. And when she did that, her lender, who issued both that 80% and that 20% financing, her lender said, hey, the second mortgage, don't worry about it anymore. Because, like I said earlier, it was basically worth nothing. Property values had plummeted so much in 2008. So Karen, the woman in this article, she said, okay, great. Less money to pay every month. And so years go by, and she starts getting calls from a company called First American National. They call her and say, Karen, you have an insane amount of money due. I mean, some crazy amount. And she thinks this is a scam. So a few more years go by, and she keeps getting calls from them. This number is going up. And then soon, she realizes that this isn't a scam. She starts getting letters from this company, and it's important to know. So Karen bought this house for $365,000, so 20% for her second mortgage was $73,000. And they're calling her, they're sending her letters saying, you owe us $184,000. This is because there was that second mortgage that has to be paid off, but also the interest over the years and the costs and additional fees. Ultimately, Karen can't pay this money off. She doesn't have this much in cash to just give to this company. And they have the right to do this because they own that second mortgage. They can basically collect on that debt. So they foreclose on the property, it goes to foreclosure auction, and guess who the winning bidder is? It's First American National. So they get their money, Karen's basically evicted from her house, it's foreclosed on, and it no longer belongs to her. So thank you guys so much for watching. I had a blast making this video. Hope it was informative. I hope you learned something. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. I'm going to be putting out more real estate related content soon. So stay tuned, and I'll see you guys in the next one.